And there was this one line that just stuck with me, which was, when you come from a place of integrity, you can never be wrong. And I didn't know what that meant, but it just spoke to me in this way of like, there's something off here. And on that sabbatical, my husband and I traveled the world. We went to Egypt and Europe and all these places. And it was on a mountaintop in South Africa, on Table Mountain. I had this experience. It was so subtle, but so profound. I was sitting on top of the mountain and the sun was setting. I saw the most beautiful sunset. And this wave of peace just washed over me that I had never in my life ever felt before.
Hello, and welcome to the Connect podcast. This show is all about helping you connect to your soul's calling so you can take action on it. Because the sweetest success is a blend of discovering your purpose with the inner drive to bring it to life. I'm Sheila Botello, health coach, lifestyle entrepreneur, and mom of two, best known for my online wellness programs, mentoring, and self-love passion. Listen in for inspiring interviews, solo chats, and Q&A sessions that will move you past overwhelm towards what lights you up. Stop accepting good enough and go for your version of great in your health, business, and relationships. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back. Today, I'm sharing an inspiring conversation all about reimagining your life as you move closer to your calling. If you've ever found yourself pulled to shift direction after investing years in a specific way of life and work, you'll be so refreshed by my guest's story. Dr. Sweta Chawla is a speaker, author, and life and leadership coach for highly driven professionals and groups who want to step further into their potential without compromising their integrity. She is known as a copywriter for the soul and has a gift for getting to the heart of the matter. Sweta held a very accomplished decade-long career as a professor of pharmacy when the premature birth of her son and an unexpected disappointment in her golden handcuff job led her to make several life and career pivots. Since 2013, she has guided professionals, budding creatives, and entrepreneurs to recognize what holds them back from playing full out in work and life. She supports her clients to liberate themselves and helps illuminate how to bridge from stressful to resource success by igniting and embracing their inner natural leader. Dr. Sweta is author of the book, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, Now What? And a contributor to the award-winning anthology, She's Got This, Essays on Standing Strong and Moving On. She has published articles and essays in several journals and magazines and has spoken on many stages and panels, including the White House. Our conversation was enlightening on so many levels, and her story was such an inspiration for listening to your heart and trusting the process of building the life you want. Enjoy the episode. Sweta, welcome to the show. I am so happy that you're able to join us today.
I am so excited to be here. It's such a nice break from Zoom school.
Absolutely. Oh, yes, it's quite different. And now you've been described as a gifted storyteller and a soulful scientist who will inspire people to show up in the world with courage and flow, both personally and professionally. Now you're adapting this into your son's life as well, which is even on a more micro level at home, which is great. This, though, is not where you started out. In fact, you've called yourself the Queen of Reinvention. And after your career as a professor of pharmacy, you were led to a pivot in your life and your career. Tell me about that time in your life and whether this was a sudden pivot or if it was something that had been stirring within you for a while.
That is such a good question. My answer is going to be both and. It was stirring and then it became sudden, and I'll explain what that means. So, the way that it happened was that I was working as a professor of pharmacy. I was in my 10th year and life was good. Life was really, really good. Like I was excelling at work. I got married to my soulmate who I met while traveling to Peru. We had just bought a beautiful condo overlooking the New York City skyline across the street from the university I worked at.
Which university was that?
It was Long Island University. So it was in Brooklyn. It was the Arnold and Marie Schwartz College of Pharmacy. And in my work, I was doing work that I loved. I started going on mission trips through the university, which was life-giving for me. And so I was really on cloud nine. And then it always felt like something was still missing. And I got to that next checklist, the next check on the life resume, which was to have a baby, because that's maybe what I thought was missing. Like, okay, maybe the baby's going to really seal the deal here. And I got pregnant on the first try. And the most amazing pregnancy. My hair was thick. I was swimming 3 times a day. It was great. And it was during a not random, like just a regular checkup, on my 34th week checkup. I went in and I had actually made a mistake on my appointment. So I was supposed to go on August 10th, which was a Wednesday, and I went on August 8th, which was a Monday. And they said, do you want to have your appointment? I said, yes. With my husband, the doctor's measuring my stomach, and my husband's like, oh, how do you measure it? She's like, I'll show you. And then suddenly her eyes just got really big. And she whips out the sonogram. She rubs it on my belly and was like, run to the hospital right now. And it was just in that moment, my complete life turned upside down. My son had lost weight in my womb. So there was no amniotic fluid. At 34 weeks, he was only 2 pounds, 9 ounces.
Oh,
and literally, if I had come any later, if I had gone for my regular appointment, he probably wouldn't have made it.
oh my goodness. Oh,
So needless to say, this imagined beautiful kind of expectation that I had of motherhood is going to fulfill me in a way that I still felt like was missing. It was the absolute opposite. I mean, I was devastated. I felt like a failure before even going home with my son, which I didn't hold my son for 24 hours. I didn't get to bring him home for an entire month. And in that time frame, after, on top of that, I went back to after maternity leave, I went back to my job at the university, and a promotion that I thought I was a shoo-in for. I mean, I was getting awards for my work. I didn't get. And I still remember sitting across from my dean, the sun shining in my face and tears going down my eyes, and repeating the words like, what was I working so hard for?
mm-hmm.
And I think that when we ask those questions, those real deep soul questions, we get answers.
We do.
And suddenly things started to happen in my life. Like one of the beautiful things about that job was it was golden handcuffs. I had all this vacation, benefits, the title, et cetera. And we went on a trip and we love to travel. My husband and I met traveling. My son was 9 months old, and we went to Israel. And I remember waking up in the morning and sitting on the balcony, just staring at the Sea of Galilee and just crying and crying and crying. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was mourning.
Yeah.
And my son actually did bring me to this place of fulfillment, but not in the way that I expected. He did it through catalyzing me. And I always say, I birthed him, but he gave me life.
Wow.
It's like, he came into the world small to say to me, Mama, you are playing so small. So
People would have thought that's not necessarily the truth, though, because here you were winning the awards and everything, and maybe you got passed over for that promotion. But by all standards, you weren't playing small. But isn't that interesting how what was birthed from this experience
exactly.
Bigger.
Exactly. My life looked big on the outside, but the truth was that I'm not saying that it was all wrong. I mean, my life was great. And I think that's actually the beautiful thing that I love to share is that I didn't have to eat, pray, love my life. I didn't blow it up, everything away, but I made drastic change. Like I still have my husband. I still, have we're still a family, but I made some really big changes because the truth is that that job was fulfilling for me. I did love it initially, but it was around year 3 that I started to get those whispers, right? That there's something else, there's something off here. And then it wasn't until I took a sabbatical about 6 or 7 years in where I started to explore this. I started getting books like What Color is Your Parachute, etc. And there was this one line that just stuck with me, which was, when you come from a place of integrity, you can never be wrong. And I didn't know what that meant, but it just spoke to me in this way of like, there's something off here. And on that sabbatical, my husband and I traveled the world. We went to Egypt and Europe and all these places. And it was on a mountaintop in South Africa, on Table Mountain. I had this experience that it was so subtle, but so profound. I was sitting on top of the mountain and the sun was setting. I saw the most beautiful sunset. And this wave of peace just washed over me that I had never in my life ever felt before. It was like I still had all my problems, right? Like nothing really changed, but I felt a way that I had never felt before. And it took me on this journey of what is that feeling? Like, I want that feeling. So I kind of did the soul searching that I think a lot of people do when they hit these pivotal points in their life. And I started to connect to this deeper place. And I was reading a book by Carolyn Mace called The Anatomy of the Spirit.
Mm.
There was a line in the book, and it's really funny because it actually didn't say what I thought it said, because I actually met Caroline and I had her sign that exact page. And I was like, this doesn't even say what I heard. But basically what I heard was, you don't know God. You don't know God. And I was like, I mean, I was a seeker. Like I read books. I read all the spiritual books, right? And I just remember crying. I'm like, I don't know God. I don't know God. And then and it's really funny because this has happened to me more than once in my life, but I Googled, how do you know God? And I swear, Google has a cosmic connection, because I landed on some website that said, just ask God to come into your life. Just ask God to come into your life. So I did that, and I had the most profound dream. And it was a dream where I was on a pulpit with my pastor, because my husband's Catholic and we were getting married in a Catholic church. I'm Hindu. And I had to go through pre-Cana, and he was with me on the pulpit, and I looked down and all my childhood bullies were there.
Wow.
And I forgave them.
Wow.
And I woke up that morning at like 5:00 in the morning, and I started writing poetry. And I was walking to the gym, and I had that feeling again. I was looking at the trees, and I'm like, it was very like in the movies, like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And the same thing, like, I'm happy for no reason. What is this? What is this thing? And it just touched me so deeply. And my life did improve, and I did make changes. That was the first go around, right? And that's when I went back to the university and I started to ask for what I wanted. I started to lead and say, these are the projects that I want to do, as opposed to just succumbing to the system that was there that I didn't like. So I stepped it up, what I call, going from a reluctant leader to a natural leader. And that's how I ended up doing mission trips, et cetera. But I think when my son was born a few years later, he was like, okay, now we're ready for the next level of integrity. Mm-hmm. Like that's what it was. It was the integrity piece, which was you went as far as you could within where you were. And I meant to be a teacher. I taught at a university, and I always say now I need to be teaching at the university.
Oh, I love it.
Which is, I couldn't teach about drugs anymore. It just was not in alignment with, I was always an advocate. I was always a pioneer and cutting edge within pharmacy. I was always about patient care and education and prevention. I was a diabetes educator. So I never fell into the like drug thing, but I could only go so far.
Yes.
And then the universe, God, spirit source, whatever you want to call it, my soul was like, okay, we need to let's go even bigger and be in more integrity.
You are the storyteller everyone says you are. I'm just captivated by your story. It's like, oh, right. Yes. Questions. I have things to ask. Wow. What an incredible journey that began once your son was born. So when you traveled the world, your son was with you?
Well, so the first time in 2009, he wasn't born yet. So, and my husband and I were getting married that year. So it was a sabbatical. We even got married in Peru, and we traveled a bunch of places. It was in 2011, he was born. In 2012, we took the trip to Israel. So that's another example. Like, we traveled. One of the reasons we traveled so much was because we fell into what everybody says. When you have a kid, you can't travel. So my husband and I went to like 30 countries together. But the minute my son was born, and to this day, he's now, 8, 9. By the time he was 6, he's been to 17 countries. He's like, we need, when's our next trip? So it's that whole bigger life kind of thing that's the energy that he's brought into my life.
That's so beautiful. And not falling into, well, people say this, so, okay, I'm going to listen to people, but instead saying, I'm going to try on the type of life that I truly want. And I'm going to find out for myself,
Nice.
because that is where obviously so much beauty is found and so much connection to your soul, but also the greater community of people. When you're in different cultures and you're seeing the world the way you have, that really builds empathy, that builds creativity. I love this whole thing, and I have so many questions. And first, I just want you to tell me a little bit about your family. Talk to me about your loves and what are your favorite qualities about the two of them?
Mm, that's such a good question. Oh my God, I love this. Especially in a time where we're like together all the time in a small apartment. It's like you tend to think about the other stuff, right? What it gets to be. So I love this inquiry. What I love about my husband is that he is just so incredibly dedicated. He's just so dedicated to our family. And I'm a totally different person from when he met me. And he's stood by me through the whole entire experience. And, but the one thing I do want to say was that I think there's something about him and my son that helped me to be more of who I am, but not in the way expected. Or, it's actually through the rubs, it's through the challenges in some ways. But even when I met my husband, I was me, but not who I always pretended to be. Like I met him while traveling in Peru, something like that. That was a new experience for me. That was my very first trip. And I loved the trip so much. I extended it one extra week and I was volunteering and, living with a Spanish family where we had no hot water. I wore the same clothes almost every other day because I didn't know how to pack for a trip like that. And it was not those pretty circumstances, but I felt so connected. And, in the last day, I extended my trip and I met him on the last day. And the way I was with him was I followed my heart. I followed my heart. Like I truly, like he doesn't speak English. He's from another country with a different religion. Like all of my upbringing, my Indian upbringing of, like you got to marry a certain type of person, etc., out the window. And I think it was that like letting me be me, being around him, being, on that land that sustained these big changes in a way, because he was with me then. So even when I came back to my, perfect life or the perfect life I was trying to create in New York, he knew the real me in a way. And I feel like he's just loved me through all the changes that I've made. So I would say that's really what I appreciate so much about him.
Mm.
And my son, I mean, I've talked about it. He's my little catalyst, he pushes me again, not in a, I think, conscious way, just by who he is and the circumstances he brings in my life to make me more creative, to come up with solutions to really be able to live more of the way that I want. Again, without having to blow everything up, so I call myself a traditional nonconformist or a good girl rebel. Like, I have both in me. Like, I want to fit in. I want to have the traditional life and I want to do it my way.
I love that. Oh, yeah. And so that's so beautiful what you shared about them. And it is so important for us to stop, to pause, to really think about those things, because especially now with how busy life has gotten for so many people, it's easy to not focus on that, but to focus on the minutia of the day and maybe what's not working and how things are different for so many people and the new challenges that arise. So it's great that you were very quick to be able to recall those good things. That's amazing. And so now, how are you finding you're balancing your work with your individual clients, your corporate clients, and how you're designing your offerings? Has there been a huge change since prior to 2020, or has it been mainly online for you? You do a lot of in-person stuff traditionally.
Well, I've done both. And last year, I was like, I love being in person. So I was pursuing the in-person stuff. And so, 2020 was all about, like 2019, 2020 was in-person live workshops. That was what I was like, I loved, I really appreciated. And, I was, the area of my business that I've been focusing on was speaking and in-person speaking, so I did my first non-local talk at a conference in Arizona. So the beginning of the year started and I was like, yes, this is it. And my son is third grade. I felt like he was finally settled We got him set up in school. He was doing well. And I was like, oh my God, this is finally it. Because I've always had that push and pull feeling with family, even from my family of heritage. There's just a lot of ways that I had to be there for my family. And so I was just so excited. And then COVID hits and it was like, wow, you know what I mean? And I went back into that place of like, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Here we go again. And something was different this time. I recently wrote about this because something was different. Because usually when that dynamic happens, I will do the 3 steps back and it'll take me a while. It could take me months. It could even sometimes take me a year to like get going again. And I was able to shift immediately. I had my tantrum, but I used my tools. And this is one thing that I say to a lot of people, a lot of what I talk about, or, this is kind of my new framework that I've been really so excited to share about, is going from a reluctant leader to a natural leader. And I think that a leader is somebody who's able to adapt, right? It's a person who's able to adapt to the circumstances and situations. And one of the ways that I have lived my life that I try to teach others is to really live through the feminine. And for me, from the feminine, it's about frequency rather than form. Mm. And so I was able to very quickly see that I usually have an archetype that comes to me at the beginning of the year that I'm like being asked to step into. And it was very clear from January 1st. I got so many signs, which I call goddess winks, that it was the archetype of the teacher. And I had some wounding around it, having been a professor for 10 years. And it's like, again, being a teacher, but in your way. And I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm speaking. I'm doing workshops. It's happening, right? And then boom, COVID happens. But I was quickly able to see like, I'm still in the archetype of teacher, right? For my son. I was in the archetype of teacher for my son. And a lot of the way that I work, because I'm a visionary and a lot of people I work with, I think have big visions and they get overwhelmed with it. So I actually have a framework that I call the seasons of success. So it's really about, 4 inquiries that I use, and it's in a season of 3 to 4 months. And that really helps with being able to not get overwhelmed, but also being able to have some tangible success, like soul success, and worldly success in a short amount of time so that you can keep moving forward. And one of the inquiries is, how are you being asked to grow? And the other one's, what's being asked to release? And it was very clear to me right away that I still had some stuff around teaching through my son, like how I was showing up with him. That influences all areas of your life, because I don't feel like our lives are siloed. It's not just our work. Right. It's who we are is how we show up in all areas of life. And I think that goes back to frequency.
Did you find that the way you were showing up were you happy with the way you were showing up as teacher with your son, or were you bringing things into your teaching of your son that maybe you had wanted to leave behind, or what was your experience?
Both and. So initially it was like, oh, this is a time to catch up, because my son, had some he learns differently. And so it was like, I'm going to catch him up. We're going to do all the homework. A big part of why I left the university was I didn't like the way education was done. It was teaching to test.
Right.
It was about learning, and creativity has become such an important part of my life. So it was really cool because we did include a lot of creativity. My son made his own play. We did obstacle courses. We had a lot of fun. And there were still those elements of me that, even though I didn't believe in it, but it was so embodied in me because I was a good girl. I was a good student, right? I got my value. Actually, because I was bullied and made fun of so much when I was younger, my value came from my intelligence. And so my message in the world is we need to nurture our nature, who we naturally are, right? And so I'm saying this, and then it's like, but here's my son who learns differently than me. Right? Who doesn't, he really rebels against and so it was like both and I think this season was like the purification process in a way for me of looking at that and saying, okay. And then it's actually, and I was saying I wrote about this recently because I just started studying astrology, and the astrology group that I'm in, the woman who started it, she had said that earlier in her career, she's been teaching for 40 years, she would help teachers. She would read the charts of the students in the teacher's class so that the teachers could see how the kids learned and group them accordingly.
That's powerful.
It is so powerful. And it brought me back to this. It brought me into a place of action related to an inquiry that I always sat with, which was, I help women, people of color. My people are psychedelic sheeps,
I love it.
to come back to their nature and to lead from that. So that's why I call it reluctant leader to natural leader, because a lot of who they are, they either or fear standing out, or they're painstakingly trying to fit in. And a lot of the work I do is helping them to reintegrate those beautiful gifts that they have and help them to see that that's actually what's going to help them to reach the goals that they want. But they have to come back into relationship with it. But then I always had this inquiry of, what if we were never, ever conditioned out of our nature? What if our nature was nurtured from a young age? And so I feel like, again, my son's my catalyst to say, okay, mom, you say this, now put, like, let's see it in action. Let's see it in action. And then the universe, I would never in a million years think that I would study astrology. I'm a trained scientist, I would never imagine it, but that's how I'm being. And that's my definition of leadership. It's not about ruling over, being number one, being in power. It's about, how are you being led?
Yes.
And all of this to me is, life is always trying to usher us. But if we're so attached to form and what we think success means or fulfillment, whatever, and we're not paying attention to how we're being led, I think that's where we get disappointment. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Oh, yes. This whole notion, now that you're teaching your son, you're learning through, you've always been teaching your son. It's just now it's more structured learning. I do love that you're looking through the lens of, how does he learn best, and making sure that he's using his creativity. I've home educated my kids all the way through. My oldest is now in grade 9, and he's doing online school through our Ministry of Education now. And yet all through our experience together, I needed to unlearn some of the ways I was taught also. And one of my sons is left-handed. And so it was a point of, let's just explore and see, well, which hand are you going to write with? That's kind of where it started. And nurturing the creativity meant, what do you feel like learning? Yes, we had our structured curriculum, but then we had the freedom also to be able to do extra things that were more in line with what they were passionate about. And when I allowed them that space to create from their place of their own desires and their own creativity, they started to really enjoy the learning process. And I believe at this point, I can say they're lifelong learners. They're always learning. When we're not doing school, they're reading about something or learning, like just picking up a book and finding out the information that they need. So I think yourself and so many people are now having this experience with their children. And it can be really challenging, though, to let go of the way we were taught and to try and squish our kids into a box. So I love that you're looking at it a different way and having a different experience. It's so rich for him and for your relationship. Don't you find that your relationship takes on a whole new vibe in this setting?
Yeah. First of all, I think your kids are so lucky that they've been exposed to this at such a young age. My son's a lefty too. So I think for me, it's really interesting, and to be honest with you, I think that I've focused so much on the not fitting into the box part of it. And one thing I'm very passionate about is I'm a bridge. So even with my health, right, being in the healthcare field, I've totally embraced Eastern and alternative health, but I don't want to throw out Western. And the same thing with the education system.
Yes.
Like, I could totally go alternative and I could homeschool or I could Waldorf school. But I think that for me, it feels like there's something really important about bringing this into the system. Mm-hmm. And so the creativity part and the connecting and being a life, like that part, I feel like we got down. And now it's about, how do we actually do the regular structured stuff? It's a learning curve, to be honest with you. It is a learning curve, because I have this tendency to sometimes throw the baby out with the bathwater. When I first awakened out of my science pharmacist traditional life, I was like, oh, I'm going to go buck wild, and I was just like, I don't want anything to do with traditional medicine or science. And I've come back into this place of embracing both. And I feel like I'm going through that with education as well.
It's definitely a pendulum swing, and
Yes.
there's so much goodness that we can gather from both sides. And it really is finding that the happy place, the sweet spot that works for you and your family, and knowing that it is going to look different for everyone. And that's okay. That's what makes our beautiful world so beautiful. We're so
Yes.
diverse in how we learn and in the structure that we enjoy. It's great that we have all of this diversity in learning.
Right.
And people coming through various ways of learning as well.
Yeah.
So, as we're talking about helping people to really connect to their purpose and becoming natural leaders, what should people do if they know they want to step into a bigger role in their life, but they don't know what that role is? Would you walk me through an overview of the process that you take clients through from where they are to discovering and acting on their purpose?
Absolutely. So who I've worked with is usually they know what they want, but they don't think it's possible. They have a how that they're like, that's not possible. Or some people, which was my case, I didn't even know what I wanted. And so I have a book. It's called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. Now What? And it's 21 days, it's 21 inquiries. I call them result creators. So it's a little bit of a story and then a question and then a reflection point. So the first inquiry, which they can actually download on my website if they're interested, and I'll be doing a video challenge soon. So I'm going to be sharing about it as well to walk people through it more. But this goes back to frequency over form. So I think a lot of us, our brain wants form so badly. So because we don't know what it looks like, we won't take action. Or what I always say is we create a problem at step 10 before taking step 1. And so I just want to name that in the beginning, because if we kind of know we're doing it, then we're like, oh, okay, I'm doing it. So the very first step that I like to bring people to is to think about people in their life that they admire. And then really name what is it about their life that they admire. And I give full permission here to really be honest and not who they think they should admire, but really honestly, who are the people that they're consuming all their information? And in my book, I completely out myself because I picked the Kardashians. And in my world, it's very like, oh, they're fake, they're blah, 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 whatever. And I'm like, throw that stuff out, right? What's the stuff underneath there? The example I gave in the book, and this was at the time when I wrote it, was the things that I loved about them was they were very family oriented. They were honest. And I don't know if it's true or not, but at least in the show, they were honest. They didn't shame themselves if they were fighting or if they loved, like they were just full out in their expression. And they never stopped themselves. So the example I gave in my book, there was an episode that I had watched where the mom had gone to a Broadway show and she was like, I want to be on Broadway. And she didn't stop herself. She went and signed up to dance for Broadway. And I admired that so much because my mind would a million reasons why I can't do that, right? Like, I don't know how to dance, I don't blah, 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 whatever, like excuse after excuse. And so understanding who you're attracted to and why you're attracted to that, and being able to name like just the qualities and I call it like the energy and the vibration of it without attaching to form, I would say is step 1. And then step 2 would be to engage with that energy, without knowing where it's going to lead or what it means. And so just to give you an example of this, when I knew I wanted to leave pharmacy, everybody was like, what are you going to do? Right. And I was like, you know what? For the first time in my life, I don't know. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I've always had a plan. I've always had it was 7 years of pharmacy school right out of high school. So I was like, I'm just going to take classes that I enjoy. So I took a medical intuitive class, which, oh my God, that just opened up my whole world. But I also hired a career coach, and I still remember this. The career coach was like, okay, what's your dream? And I was like, dream? I don't have time to dream. I got a job, like I was very New York. And she said to me, well, you're numb. And I was like, okay, well, how do I get a numb? Right. Because I'm all like the doer.
Tell me what I have to do.
Right. So she gave me some, and it worked. And I remember I went from like writing bigger dreams within pharmacy to eventually going outside of pharmacy. And then the craziest thing happened. I felt this impulse to write. I ran up to like the roof of my building and I had a notebook and I just wrote something out. The title of it was Know Thyself. Mm-hmm. And I showed it to some of the friends that I met in the intuitive class. And they were like, this is something. This is going to be something. And I'm like, what do you mean it's going to be something? I had no idea what they were talking about. And then it led to having this impulse. I would breastfeed my son at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up and I just started typing, and it turned into a blog that I wrote for 4 years, where I just wrote and wrote, and I aired all my dirty laundry. Coming from a culture where you don't talk about anything, like
Right.
you're not supposed to ever share your insecurities, your vulnerabilities, nothing about your family life. I was sharing everything that I was learning about myself. I was doing so much inner work and being honest with myself about things. And I was sharing the journey along with it. And I never, ever in a million years imagined I would write a book. And then I wrote a piece for an anthology. It's an award-winning anthology. If you would have told me you're going to be a writer and you're going to write 2 books at that time, I would have been like, you're crazy. I don't know how to, to this day, I don't know where to put a comma. My grammar sucks.
That's what editors are for. It's okay.
Exactly. It took me a few years to get that. You know what I mean? But I prioritized what was calling me forth, which was just expressing myself. It wasn't about getting awards. It wasn't about how many people are going to read it. It was for me. It's something I had to do for me.
When you actually do it without any idea of what kind of reward or any need to be rewarded, that is where truth lies and probably a lot of direction. Would you say that since writing that was like a catalyst in and of itself also?
Absolutely. Here's the thing that I have learned is that the universe, divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it, knows what are the longings in your heart. And you actually don't need to make it happen. You just have to listen and follow it. And I always say this, you take step 1, the universe meets you 10 times. That's the hardest part I find for people is having the courage to do for themselves, do what's calling them, because there's always like, what are people going to think? Or I can't abandon my family. Like we have all those. And the ironic thing is, if you have the courage to follow it, it's like this greater intelligence knows what's important to you and it will take care of those things.
That
It
is so relaxing. And it's something that I really want people to scream from the mountaintops. And I'm so glad that you talk about it because it's something that I've only become aware of in recent years also. That whole idea of taking a step and then the next steps become evident ahead of you. But if you're just sitting in either fear or sitting in the unknown and not wanting to make a move, you're not going to see the steps that are maybe going to be laid out before you. You're not going to meet the person. You're not going to have the connections that could potentially lead you to your life's work. And you're going to always wonder. But what a
Yes.
relaxing thought that we're not in this alone.
Yes.
We still have this idea. We're so, I guess it's just the construct that we live with, where our value is in what we have accomplished instead of our value being in being. We were divinely created. I believe we were divinely created. Maybe there's a purpose here for our lives. And instead of thinking that we're doing it alone, well, we didn't put ourselves here. We were put here.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I work with like what I lovingly call our psychedelic sheeps, my people have often had to fend for themselves. And it was like because the environments, the homes, the families that they were in, they weren't supported to be who they were. They didn't have that support. They had to create their own life. And so and which is a gift. Like you would not be where you are today if you didn't do that. But what helps you survive actually usually stands in the way of you thriving. And so I had that I'm in it all alone. It's me. It's up. If it's going to be, it's up to me vibe. And really my journey has been to learn how to trust, how to trust myself, how to trust other people, and how to trust life again. Because what I have seen for myself and the people that I work with is that the people in our life who didn't get us, we think that that's the world. We think that that's our world. Like that's the bigger world. And we don't realize that's only our, this is what to me is playing small is that we're living in the constructs of where we came from. And when we step out and we see like, oh, just because your brother or your teacher didn't appreciate the fact that you talk a lot, my story, right? Like that you're very talkative, you're telling me the reflection you gave back to me about, oh my God, you're such a great storyteller. Can you imagine growing up where you're talking all the time and you're being told, like, stop talking, right? And really, when the message wasn't stop talking, it was learn to talk at the right time.
Right.
But that's not the message that was given to me that I heard. I say both and, because when we're younger, we don't understand complexity. And so I had to like, my nervous system was like, you talk too much, you talk about yourself too much. And it's through allowing this, and it takes practice. You got to do it a lot in a while and get positive feedback for you to really see, like, oh, there's a bigger world out there that actually wants you to express the very thing that you thought was wrong about you. It's just an interesting journey, like I said, of what served you to survive where you are. Like, bless it. We don't make it wrong. And now I'm ready to evolve into something greater than that.
Absolutely. And in those experiences, whether they may have been deemed as negative, there's so many lessons in that. And you're a different person based on those experiences that maybe were quite difficult. But had you not had those experiences, you wouldn't have the depth to who you are and to who you're serving, and also the empathy for the other people who are going through the very same thing or similar thing. Yeah,
100%.
it's so true. No one has come through to finding a very happy, successful life without some form of struggle. And I feel like everyone I talk to has told me that the struggle was necessary and they're grateful for it. Now, as they look back, certainly we're going through it. We're not very happy about it.
Yeah.
It's not cool.
Yeah.
But now, hopefully, people talk about that enough that while we're struggling, we can actually remind ourselves, okay, wait, what is this trying to teach me? What is it trying to show me about myself or about my circumstance? And how am I going to learn from this and use this to move forward?
It's like the classic hero's journey.
Yes.
But I'm actually really interested in the heroine's journey, which to me is just slightly different in that, the hero's journeys, you go through something, you learn, you bring back, you help others. But in the heroine's version is that you're not in this alone. There's actually people here to support you into becoming this higher version of yourself. And to me, that was a big part of my unlearning as well, like having this deep sisterhood wound of having been bullied. And I'm a social person. Like, I'm a very social person. I have a lot of people around me. And this was my newsletter last night. But when I moved out to California, I heard about this thing called the sisterhood wound. And I was like, what is that? I don't know what it is, but I have it, which was not feeling safe to be fully myself, be bright, because being afraid of making other people jealous or uncomfortable, etc. And the thing is, I had to heal that because I couldn't share my gifts without other women. Like, you are helping me bring forth my story and my gift. If I didn't trust again, if I didn't heal that, then I couldn't do this work. It's just a greater version of the story that I think we need to share more about, that we actually don't even have to heal alone or go through the struggle or the learning alone as well.
You're so right. Bringing the feminine into something that was known as a masculine thing, being a hero, when certainly everyone can look around at the women in their life and say, wow, look what they're doing. Look how they're serving in their world. Where would we be without the women? We need both. The heroine's journey, I love that. It's that sisterhood. And when a woman is winning and rising, she brings other women with her. And it's a beautiful thing to watch and witness. So oh my goodness, I could talk to you for hours, and I'm sure we will, but I do have a couple more questions. Because I'm very much into self-care. I'm a cyclical self-care coach. That's really my focus. As an integrated nutrition health coach, I focus on the cyclical rhythms for women. And I want to know, what are your self-care non-negotiables?
I have so many. I'm going to be honest with you. I have a lot.
Awesome. I love hearing that.
So, being a mom, that the morning time, like, I need a lot of space, and I have had to really train my family to know that about me and not feel guilty about it. And so my morning time is really important, whether that it's writing in my journal, whether that's traditional meditating, whether it's going for a walk. Like, that's one of my non-negotiables. The others are dance. and creativity and art. So painting is something I do just for myself because it feels really, really good. And then I would say the third most important thing is sisterhood. It's scheduled. And initially I had to pay for this, like by being in groups, et cetera, because I didn't, have this, but women to check in with weekly. I actually have a business bestie where we use the frameworks from my coaching weekly to check in, where I have this thing called the CASA form. And the first C is celebrate. So we celebrate together, and the A is awareness, is what awarenesses have we had in our business, in our life, and then setting an intention. And then, what actions align with that intention. So I would say sisterhood and structure. Those two things are also a part of my self-care.
Oh, that's great. I love that. CASA. I'm going to be rewinding that just to take notes on that. That sounds beautiful.
Yeah. I'm happy
Oh.
to share with you. I have a PDF. I can share it with you.
Oh, thank you. Yes. And so what would you say your biggest area of growth is right now in your life? And it can be business, professional, whichever.
I would say that my biggest area of growth is adapting. I think that I still have a little bit of this, like when everything is settled, then I can.
Right.
And it's about really trusting in my own capacity to be able to show up when things are intense. That would be my biggest growth, because I think there's still a part of me that's just like, oh, when is everything going to go back to normal? Like, when is my son going to go back to school and I can just dedicate myself to my business? And I was just thinking about that today. Like, I find activities for my son to do, and then he's bored of it, right? And then I have to come up with something else. And I could look at that as like, oh, it's never going to pan out, or, whatever. Where actually, going back to the inquiry that you asked me, which was, what does my son offer me, is he constantly keeps me creative. I'm always having to adapt and come up with new solutions, and trusting that, just really resting in my ability to adapt, I would say, is my biggest growth.
Oh, I feel like so many parents are with you on that one right now. They're just screaming, amen. That is true. So what is next for you, and where can we find and follow you?
What is next for me? I'm so excited and proud to say that I am birthing something into the world, even during Zoom school.
Yay!
I have a 6-week supportive sister circle called the Permission to Play Full Out, and it starts October 24th. You can find that on my website, drswetacoach.com/permission circle. And celebrating that and kind of getting excited about it. I have this Live Out Loud challenge that I did last year that I'm going to be doing again, probably on my Instagram. And so that's at all my handles on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, which I'm not on a lot, is Dr. Sweta Chawla. So it's DR and then Sweta Chawla. And so, you can find all of that stuff on there. But I would say that's the most exciting thing that I'm really juiced up about.
That sounds amazing. And yes, everything, links to that, links to how to follow you, are all going to be in the show notes. Sweta, it has been such a joy and a delight chatting with you today. Thank you for sharing your story and your insights with us.
It's been really fun. I mean, this is the thing that I love to do more than anything, is tell stories and be in connection with soul sisters. So thank you for creating this space, and thank you for supporting me and my voice. And I look forward to doing the same for you and for all the women that we get the pleasure of being able to be in contact with.
Thank you so much. Now, for our listeners, if you loved this conversation, please share it with someone that you care about. Share to your Instagram stories and tag me at Sheila A. Botello, and Sweta, as you heard, at Dr. Sweta Chawla. Contacts are linked in the show notes. And when you do, let us know what your biggest takeaway was from this conversation. I don't know how you're going to pick just one. You can pick a couple. We are all about finding and living your purpose over here. And there's no greater feeling than knowing the information is positively impacting you. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for being here with me on the Connect podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with someone you think would enjoy it. Also, if you head over to iTunes to leave a review, I'd be so grateful. Let us know what your favorite parts were and what you'd like to hear more of. It will help us have a greater impact, elevating many more people to grow and succeed together. See you next time.